piece. The bottom gas in the cylinders was Trimix 1550, a blend of 15% oxygen, 50% helium, and the remainder nitrogen. At this depth, the amount of nitrogen in regular air would send them tripping, and the oxygen would render them unconscious and eventually dead from drowning. The choices were Trimix, in which some of the nitrogen was replaced by adding helium, or Heliox, in which there was no nitrogen at all. They had tried Heliox on their last series of deep dives, but the lack of any nitrogen had made Taylor jittery, and Dahlgren paranoid. A little nitrogen at that depth, they discovered, was useful to calm the nerves. Also, helium was expensive. Trimix used less of it. Taylor smiled through her mask as she tied off a jump line and started a sweeping search for the guide line. After searching for a few minutes, she found the nylon guide line, and soon she and Dahlgren were swimming together on either side of the line, through the orange muck, headed for the constriction that Dahlgren had jokingly christened the Ball Buster after his first trip through. After pushing their tanks ahead and squeezing through, it would be a short swim, but a 1-hour decompression using tables that had been cobbled together from a set borrowed from an offshore oil company and their own experience during the previous season at San Agustin. They would make their last deco stop at 10 feet, breathing pure oxygen supplied by a separate regulator attached to the pony bottle of O2 mounted between the steel cylinders of Trimix. They had opted to carry the O2 with them, because they thought they might be climbing out of the sump on the other side where no bottles could be staged. Also, they routinely made a safety stop on O2, even when there was no decompression penalty, to accelerate off-gassing and reduce the risk of decompression illness. At the end of their deco hour, they would climb out of the sump to Camp 6, where the Sherpas and other hell divers would be waiting with warm tea and freeze-dried stew. Except the line didn't lead to the Ball Buster. It terminated around a piece of breakdown where they had tied it off and turned back the first time. They had swum in the wrong direction, and although the needles on their depth gauges were plunging again, they thought they were headed for the false bottom. But in the silt and confusion, they had missed the little plastic arrows they had clipped to the guideline, pointing the way out. That's when Dahlgren had looked into Taylor's mask, and they both knew they were dead. They had less than a third of their gas left, and it wasn't enough to make it back. The others wouldn't know they were in trouble until it was too late. Nobody would arrive to save them. Dahlgren cursed himself silently. There were no rescues in cave diving, only body recoveries. And he had helped kill the person he loved most in the world. Taylor, however, was calm. Dahlgren grabbed her by the harness and attempted to drag her back down the line, but she knocked his hand away. She made a V of the fingers of her right hand and pointed fiercely at her mask, giving him the signal for, "Look, damn it!" She held up 2 fingers and shook her head. 2 can't make it. She held up her index finger and nodded. But 1 can. Then she pointed at Dahlgren. Dahlgren shook his head violently. Taylor was the logical choice. Her lungs were smaller, she would use less gas than Dahlgren, and it would be quicker for her to squeeze through the Ball Buster. And, of course, she was younger. Taylor was 24, and Dahlgren had gotten 4 more years of life. Dahlgren reached for the buckle of his tank harness. He would give her his gas, and she would make it. But Taylor grabbed his hand. Behind her mask, tears were welling in her clear blue eyes. She scribbled something on her wrist-mounted slate and showed it to him. "Only choice," it said. "My choice." It was part of an ongoing conversation they had shared about cave diving and risk during the past 3 years. These conversations had moved them not only because cave diving was arguably the most dangerous sport in the world, but because they felt it was a metaphor for life and personal responsibility. To live without risk was not really living. They had met, appropriately enough, while assisting with a body recovery from Amistad Lake near Del Rio.